Hey everybody, so I came across this story a few days ago and it's just kind of fascinating and different, so I wanted to cover it today. So, just for starters, The Economist reports that Spain deployed troops to its enclave in Ceuta, which is on the Moroccan coast, but it's part of Spain, where 8,000 migrants were trying to breach border fences to get into the Spanish territory. Morocco did little to stop this because it's upset with Spain for accepting this guy Brahim Ghali for COVID-19 treatment. He's the leader of Polisario, which fights for independence inside of Western Sahara, which Morocco claims, but it is a disputed territory. So it's quite an international story, and today let's just kind of catch up on it, understand why there's historical implications as well as territorial and international. Hey everybody, Alex Kapitko here on this quick little weekend catching up segment. So I'll keep this quick, but anyways, Morocco and Spain are not happy with each other, and I think this recent migration spout, if we want to call it that, may bring up some old tensions to the surface. So it's going to be interesting to follow.
A show of force in the Spanish enclave of Ceuta, the beach still littered with rubbish after about 8,000 migrants arrived here this week. Most swam from neighbouring Morocco. The record influx led to days of detentions and diplomacy between Spain and Morocco.
So, first and foremost, I just want to start with kind of a historical background on Western Sahara and why it's disputed. So, Western Sahara is on the northwest coast of Africa, kind of to the left of Morocco, and it's controlled by about 20% of it is controlled by this self proclaimed Arab Democratic Republic, while the other 80% is occupied by Morocco. So right off the bat, we know there's going to be tensions when it's not a country, it's disputed, yada, yada, yada. So even into the second half of the 20th century, Spain actually controlled Western Sahara. But that changed when there was this insurgency, the Polisario, who is kind of the group we're going to be talking about a lot today. And they rose up against Spanish forces from 1973 to 1975. And so that ended Spain's control of the region, but more issues came because between 1975 and 1991, there was the Western Sahara War, which had this Polisario group against the Moroccan government. And there really wasn't much of a resolution here, just kind of an armistice, a ceasefire. And the conflict is still ongoing today because it is dominated by unarmed civil campaigns of this Polisario group. And they've basically created this self-proclaimed SADR state. But again, that's only about 20% of Western Sahara. And I was in Morocco a few years ago, and I remember people were talking about Western Sahara is quite dangerous, not because of the violence, but because of the landmines. There's just so many unfound landmines. So if you're thinking about going there, maybe check up on the area and make sure you have someone watching out for those for you. So I'm going to bet that you didn't think I was going to bring this guy up, but he actually is involved in this. Donald Trump. Yeah, Donald Trump actually may be implicated in escalating these tensions. Not directly, but it could have been a side effect. So Donald Trump did something historic, maybe not in a good way, but he recognized Morocco's annexation of Western Sahara. So basically, he recognized that Western Sahara is part of Morocco. And this was in return for Morocco's decision to establish diplomatic relations with Israel. That was all kind of part of that Abraham Accords in late 2020 before Trump left office. And so basically, this was unprecedented for Morocco and Israel to have diplomatic ties like that. But for Trump to recognize Western Sahara as being part of Morocco was something that the international community has not done. And it kind of angered a lot of people, especially the Algerians, the Western Saharan Polisario group, And so Trump did break with international consensus. And something interesting I learned is that now Spain is kind of between a rock and a hard place here because they're friends with Morocco. Morocco is a key ally in the area. But also, they get most of their oil from Algeria. So Spain relies on Algeria for oil. And Algeria backs this Polisario group in Western Sahara. So Spain doesn't want to piss off this Polisario group because it could piss off Algeria, their biggest oil supplier. And so the Moroccan government wants Spain to recognize Western Sahara as part of Morocco, and Spain doesn't want to do it. They want the international discussion to be had, not just claiming it is without, that international system to do so. Now, something that is important to mention, though, is that over time, it is very likely that Western Sahara is going to be part of Morocco. It's just inevitable when Morocco, controls 80% of it, though the discussion around how that's going to happen, is it going to be split up? I don't know. Also, Mohammed VI, who's the current king of Morocco, who had this deal with Israel and Trump, he's not popular at home about recognizing diplomatic ties with Israel. And so a lot of people think there's a parallel between his government kind of turning a blind eye to these people going into Spanish territory in the same week that Gaza, the Israel-Gaza issues are going on. They think there could be a reason. I don't know. So anyways, now that we're up to the issue on the Western Sahara side, what happened recently is that Spain admitted this guy, Brahim Ghali, who, like I said earlier, is the leader of this Western Sahara independence movement. He had COVID, and Spain brought him in, admitted him into Spain to help him get treatment. And Spain claims this was all for humanitarian reasons, and it probably was. It makes sense to me. But, of course, there's history and all these tensions in the area that didn't probably help. So, kind of going on to the Spain side. Spain has 2 territories in mainland Morocco. And if you look at a map, it's interesting because they're not in Spain. They're across the Strait of Gibraltar on the Moroccan side, but it's 2 Spanish autonomous zones, I guess you could call them. And these are Ceuta and Melilla. And Melilla was retained by Spain in, I want to say I have it here, in 1956 when Morocco got their independence. And in 1995, the Spanish government basically made Melilla like their other autonomous zones in Spain. So it basically just became another region or state, basically, or community as they call it. And Ceuta is basically a city on the tip of Gibraltar right on the Moroccan side. So it's interesting. These are 2 Spanish regions inside of Morocco. And so basically what happened next is the economy in Morocco has been awful. COVID hasn't helped. And basically desperate people can just swim around the border fence from Morocco into Ceuta, Spanish Ceuta. And that's what they did. About 8,000 people broke these border fences and came into Ceuta. And the Moroccan authorities, from what I've read, basically turned their heads. I'd imagine they were just mad at Spain for helping this independence leader because he had COVID, So Spain responded to these 8,000 migrants and deployed 3,000 troops with armored cars. They also sent 200 police reinforcements. So that was a pretty militarized zone all of a sudden. And Pedro Sanchez, who is Spain's leader, he himself even flew to the city to talk. And so it's really fascinating, just this quick escalation over something kind of a petty territorial dispute. I saw yesterday in Al Jazeera that about 3/4 of these migrants have been deported or returned back to Morocco. But Spain actually has another issue growing now because there were a lot of minors in this movement into Ceuta from Morocco. And from what I've seen in Al Jazeera yesterday, there's 1,500 unaccompanied minors. And under international law, I believe it's illegal to deport them. So basically in Ceuta, the Spanish government's going to now have to deal with potentially 1,500 unaccompanied minors. And also we just must remember this isn't just a Spanish issue because it's an EU issue as well. Ceuta is European soil, not just Spanish soil. This is an EU issue. And we also need to remember that the EU has soured on immigration, basically since the refugee crisis, and when Angela Merkel and Germany took in so many Syrian and other refugees. And yes, Europe's kind of soured on that, honestly. Things are changing. There's a lot more right-wing anti-immigrant parties as well. And the one key that I think is the most important, too, is Vox. Vox is a far-right party in Spain that has definitely some fascist tendencies, a lot of right-wing populism, anti-immigrant, all the fun stuff. And the Spanish government is kind of walking on eggshells. Pedro Sanchez is center-left in PSOE, and he's walking on eggshells. He's trying to keep that coalition together. And if the Spanish government starts letting in all these asylum seekers, Vox is going to eat them alive. And so I could imagine politics in Spain are really tough. It's a political decision, and politics in Spain are going more and more right. And so the Spanish government probably doesn't want this issue right now, even if they do want to help these people. So here we are. Here we are today. It's something interesting. I will leave it with that, but I'm surprised we haven't heard more about this because it mixes history, colonial tensions, a hodgepodge of alliances. We got Algeria, the European Union, Western Sahara, Spain, Morocco, the United States involved. Trump's Middle Eastern treaties might have even escalated this. So one thing I will just say is that this highlights to me that there are still so many ghosts of Europe's, colonial past in North Africa. And I think it's going to take a miracle and more cooperation to solve this issue. Do you split up Western Sahara? Does Spain give Melilla and Ceuta back to the Moroccans? It's all tough. But I would personally try to have some sort of agreement where you do split up Western Sahara into 2 states. You can have that 20 or 30% for the Polisario group, and then Morocco takes the other bit. That's my take. All right, guys, we'll see you later. Have a great rest of your weekend.